Hi everybody, I am Luna Nguyen. I am a Vietnamese communist translator, writer, and content creator. It is my honor to be here today in this Sunday Carter Summit for Democracy amongst all of these amazing comrades. Yeah, in the last few years, the COVID-19 pandemic has been killing millions of people and causing heavy damage to the whole world, especially to the global economy. The US is now facing economic disaster with high inflation rate, a lack of workforce, and countless other systemic problems. I am currently visiting the USA, and it has been shocking to see firsthand the problems that American workers have to deal with every day. The US is right now, food and gas prices are unsustainably high in the US. Meanwhile, the federal minimum wage, the wage of over 1 million workers in the USA, has not changed since 2009. Healthcare is totally unaffordable here. It is fact that many US workers have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to earn enough for a modest living. At the same time, racism, sexism, queerphobia, and white supremacism, and also fascism are getting stronger and stronger every day in the USA. These bigoted ideologies are intentionally backed by large corporations. Fascist police are receiving ever higher funding, leading to ever increasing militarization to facilitate the brutal repression of the working class. It is very scary living here in the USA. And with all of this in mind, it is no wonder that the USA is rife with social disease. Last year, there were over 600 mass shootings in the USA, which means that there are nearly 2 mass shootings every single day. To the pandemic, depression in the US American adults tripled from 8.5% to 27.8%. And by comparison, depression in my home country, Vietnam, a much more poor and developing country, peaked at 14.6% only during the pandemic, about half of the rate of the USA. A recent report by Financial Times found out that Americans are dying younger and younger, with sharply shorter life expectancies than peer countries. Financial Times correlates the death of young Americans with things like drug use, obesity, and gun violence, all which are directly linked to poverty. And disgustingly, the richest Americans live over a full decade longer than the poorest Americans. Being a poor worker in America is a death sentence. There is nothing more authoritarian or undemocratic than a system which more or less sentences people to preventable early death for a crime of being poor. As a consequence of all of these problems and more, the facade of so-called American prosperity is crumbling. Around the world, people are starting to see the painful truth of this so-called land of the free. As of 2020, positive news of USA had fallen to a 2-decade low of 34%, according to Pew Research. Notice how these numbers are coming from reactionary organizations with capitalist funding and pro-capitalist agenda. Even the ruling class can no longer deny the depth of crisis in the USA. And in the USA itself, uprising and mass protests and worker strikes have broken out everywhere with increasing frequency. As Martin Luther King said, a riot is a language of the unheard. In the deeply undemocratic nation of the USA, desperate workers turn to mass uprising to express their frustration and grievances as they are not heard by the government and corporate powers that rule over them. As the US wraps its summit for democracy, it is important for us to recognize clearly the fact that the US is not a true democracy. And it's not a true democracy at all as it represents in the world. What the US actually has is a bourgeois democracy where capitalists hold all the power and the vast majority of the wealth while the masses suffer. US democracy is a liberal democracy which brought itself up in beautiful language draped over violent suppression. Even now, the ruling class is attempting to shove through authoritarian measures which would give American citizens prison sentences up to 20 years for just using VPNs to access foreign websites like TikTok. This is crazy. The empire is in crisis, yes, and empire only know how to respond to crisis in one way, through brutality and domination. The contradictions are growing so rapidly that the USA can no longer keep up the appearance of world leadership. China's economy is getting stronger and stronger, while countries like Vietnam, Cuba, Iran, and Venezuela are becoming more and more stable and gaining more power in the world economy. It is natural that all of us who have grown up in the fascistic neoliberal hegemony of the USA want to throw off the yoke of American dominance, the kind of dominance that brought death and horror all over the world for generations. The American empire is in decline. Its influence is getting weaker every day. Many countries that have suffered under US oppression are now banding together to form a new multilateral world order where the US is no longer able to unilaterally set the agenda. And of course, the US is trying to stop this from happening. In the last few decades, the US and its lapdogs have been trying to start a new Cold War where they accuse any countries that don't follow the hegemony and refuse to be exploited by them as authoritarian. They want to bring back the era of Red Scare, where the US gets to police the whole world and gets to decide who is good and who is evil. It wants to continue its roles as a leader, aka the bully of the entire world. And to prepare for that scheme, the US has been trying to use all of its means to spread hatred and xenophobia amongst its own population and around the world. I have been visiting the USA for nearly 5 months now, and one of the things that shocked me the most is that the amount of anti-China propaganda in the US mainstream media. Every single news broadcast includes endless discussion of China. The media talks about China far more than it talks about the problem of American authoritarianism, the problem of American government spying programs, and American police brutality, American warmongering, and the prison slavery industrial complex. Now, I am a Vietnamese. I cannot speak for Chinese people. But I do want to state a fact that even me, a Vietnamese person, I am sick of overwhelming torrent of racism and xenophobia in the US mainstream media. Vietnam, we share a border with China, and you know that the relationship between the two countries is very complicated, but I can say with full confidence that Vietnamese media has never been anywhere near as obsessed with China as at the USA today. Obviously, the US is trying to build what Michael Parenti called a perceptual reality for its own population. In other words, the ruling class of USA wants American workers to believe in an artificial version of China, a boogeyman used to scare American masses into distraction and complicity. The USA wants Americans to believe that China is so evil that it will be justifiable for the US to intervene in the near future, even with violence, just as the US spent years lying about Vietnamese communists to pave the way for its invasion of Vietnam in the 1960s. The US empire has been using many big and beautiful words such as rules-based world order, freedom and democracy and democratic alliance, and so on to cover its true evil intention, to maintain US capitalist hegemony and exploitation. It is a well-known fact amongst non-Western countries that the US is the most warmongering and it is the most brutal empire. The United States of America is the biggest war criminal in the entire world and has been for decades. For example, USA has never had to answer for its countless war crimes in Vietnam, including the use of chemical weapons in napalm, the slaughter of 2 million innocent Vietnamese civilians, mass rape and torture of countless suspected communists. And to this day, there are about 4 million victims of Asian origins in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Thousands of Vietnamese kids are still being born with birth defect because of Asian origins. Nearly every month, we find an unexploded bomb dropped by the USA in the wartime, and hundreds of barrels of toxin from the USA are being buried under our soil after they left Vietnam, after the Vietnam War. And Vietnam is just one of dozens and dozens of such violent and ruthless interventions which the USA commits year in and year out, murdering millions and millions of innocent foreign civilians in its brutal imperialist campaigns. In comparison, the so-called adversaries like Cuba, Vietnam, and North Korea have all been developing and transforming towards prosperity without invading or attacking any imperial, attacking or imperializing any foreign countries. The US claimed to be the land of the free, but it has the highest prison population in the world. 1 in every 5 prisoners in the world is imprisoned in the USA. Black people are incarcerated in the state prisons across the country at nearly 5 times the rate of white people. Racism is a systematic problem, and it reeks in the USA. Slavery still exists in the USA. It just changed its form into a prison system. If you wonder why I dare to say this, now let's read the 13th Amendment. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. And who gets to decide who is criminal and who is not? It is the bourgeois state of the United States of America. The US is still illegally occupying the nation of Hawaii, bans Hawaiian language and erases culture while poisoning its water and handing its land over to capitalist billionaires. This is cultural genocide happening right here, right now, in front of our eyes, and it is well documented. The US still has 16 territories, inchus, colonies, where indigenous people are being treated as second class, and there is no sign whatsoever that the US will ever give them back their own independence and freedom. The list of US atrocities goes on and on and on. Despite the lovely language that they use to fool their own people, the rest of the world knows that the US has no moral high ground whatsoever to lecture us about freedom and democracy. The USA has neither the position nor the credibility to lead the so-called rules-based order world. The US is never to be trusted by the rest of the world, especially by non-Western world, the so-called global South, because what we, the most downtrodden masses on earth, seek is a true multipolar world with true democracy and meaningful freedom, where the working class can express our own opinions and make sure that they are heard. Meanwhile, what the US wants is a world full of puppets and minions, which American capitalists can exploit for their own greedy personal gain. We, the socialist and communist people of the world, have to work together to put an end to this US hegemony, expose its hypocrisy and the true nature of its neoliberal bourgeois democracy to the rest of the world. We must educate people, and we need to build a powerful peace movement to stop the endless warmongering empire of the United States of America. I say this especially to American communists, socialists, anarchists, and lovers of human freedom and democracy. Why don't you have a stronger peace movement in the USA? We Vietnamese know very well about the peace movement of the US in the 1670s, which have put an end of the horrors of the American war against the people of Vietnam. Why is there no such movement today? I call upon American workers to build a new peace movement that calls for the end of American intervention, bombing, drone striking, torture, and terror around the world. We need allies within the empire to save lives and give the rest of the world a chance to blossom on our own terms. And that is why I translated this book right here in my hand. This is the knowledge that I want all of you to know about. Learn theories and apply that theory into practice to change the world, because the whole point of learning theories is to change the world, as Marx and Engels and Lenin has said. That is why it is very important to read, to learn, to study, to educate, and then to go out there, organize, practice the theories to make some change. And I want to thank the Counter Summit for Democracy for inviting me to speak here today. And I hope that there will be more events like this in the future, where socialist and anti-imperialist voices are given a chance to speak to the masses, to raise class consciousness, and to build solidarity. Once again, I am Luna Nguyen, a comrade from Vietnam. Solidarity.